Hey guys, this is Sold Out for Web Design Tuts Plus. Today what we're going to be doing is transforming Premium Pixel's dark select dropdown into HTML and CSS3. What we're going to be doing today is using a little bit of JavaScript with the help of Dropkick.js and also making sure that our dropdown scales depending on the font size. Here's a look at the final result, and as you can see it looks pretty cool, and it scales up depending on the font size. So let's get started. I want to take a look at the design elements that we need to take into account when we're making this in HTML and CSS3. So go ahead and download this from Premium Pixels and open it up into Photoshop. I've already have it open over here. As you can see, we have this drop-down menu over here. There's dividers, and we also have a bit of border shadows that we'll need to incorporate. Also, if you can see over here, we have an image that changes states, and since we're trying to make this in HTML and CSS3 only, what we'll try to do is maybe incorporate some workarounds so that we don't have to use images. Okay, so we viewed our design, and now we know what we need to incorporate when we transfer this into HTML and CSS. But can this really be done? So what we're going to be using today is the select tag in HTML, and it's just a regular dropdown, and it's just used in forms, and it's great, and you can store values and etc. But what we want to know is if we can style it to match that Premium Pixels design. So I looked into it, and here's a tutorial on how to style a select dropdown. But as you can see, even though if you change the colors of that state with just the first option, every option other than that menu over there stays as the browser default. Even if you change the images, add images, it's just the same. So here's another example. This state's totally fine, it looks good, you can style it, but when we go to view it, this is a mobile version, but same thing. In the browser, it's default and you can't change it. So how do people do it? Well, usually you use list elements. So you have a menu, just like navigations, they're all done with list elements. But what if we just want to use the select in HTML and have that same effect go on in CSS? So basically use the select HTML tag, but act as make the CSS so that it acts as a list element. That's where Dropkick.js comes in. It's a great plugin, and it allows you to do exactly that. So here's an element that's a select dropdown that's styled, and Dropkick.js is enabled. So as you can see, wow, now all of a sudden we can change this menu. Even over here in the different style, the menu changes, and it's great. So what exactly does Dropkick.js do, and how can we implement it? Well, basically what Dropkick.js does is take this select HTML and transforms it into divs with containers, with links, and it also transforms it into the options into a list elements. So what this allows us to do in CSS, as you can see, here's a theme which I'll talk about later. What it's basically going to do is allow us a lot more flexibility in the designing, as opposed to the limitations set for the select input values in CSS3. What we can do is act as if it's links, divs, and ULs, LIs that are very easy to customize in CSS. So how do we implement this exactly? Well, basically, here's our select dropdown. All we really need to do, scrolling back up to the top, sorry about this, all you need is the name for the select value and a class. So for example, over here our class is default. Notice how it says default over there. So we'll have a name of whatever countries and a class of default, and all you have to do is in jQuery run this little script. Over here you sub in what your class is. Ours is default, as we just went over, and this is all you need, and Dropkick isn't enabled, which is really great. What you can also do is do custom callbacks. So if I click blue, it will tell me, but we're not going to get into that right now. What we are going to get into right now is how to create custom themes, such as this black one, only we're going to shape it around our Premium Pixels design. So looking into here, we have a couple of things that we need to fill in to make it great, and let's get started with our HTML and CSS for this select dropdown. Alright, so go ahead and open up your favorite editor, and as you can see I already have index.html open. I also have this just a blank default HTML blank template, which will get us started on the, like, a clean slate. As you can see on this right side, I have 3 folders: CSS, fonts, and JS. We'll be using these later on. So let's get started with our CSS. Before we get started on our main CSS, what I'm going to do is actually get a really cool CSS script called Normalize.css. It's a great alternative to CSS resets, and it basically, as I said, gets everything started off on a clean slate, which is what we want. So if you click on the demo, what you'll get is what it does exactly. So it just makes everything easy. As you can see, it changes all these buttons, makes everything default and simple and ready to be styled. So if you go ahead back to this main page and click download, it's going to give you this CSS file. So why don't you go and control copy and paste, and let's bring it back here. So in our CSS folder, we're going to create a new file called normalize.css. If you open this up, we'll just paste this. It's exactly 500 lines of code, and as I said, it will make things a lot easier. So go ahead and save this, and let's link it back to our main index file. Okay, and there we have it. We're linked to our normalize.css. So if we save this index again and we go to preview, there's not really anything there. How about we just test this out? Say hello just to make sure that everything is working, and normalize.css. Yep, it seems like it's connected. So let's go ahead and now create that select dropdown and just create the base HTML structure. Okay, so I already got this script here, and if we paste, it's just a simple select with the options, and I'm going to be following that Premium Pixels design with the settings, your profile, etc. So why don't we go ahead and save this file, and let's go preview it. And there we go. We have just a simple browser default drop-down navigation, and everything seems to be working fine. So now let's go ahead and download Dropkick.js so we can get everything started. So why don't we transfer over back to Chrome and go back to Dropkick.js. So let's go ahead and download this, and there we go. So what I'm gonna do right now is open this in Finder, and here, let me just close this off and hide these. And there we go. So Dropkick.js comes with these files. We have examples.html, blank theme, Dropkick.css, and all this like other stuff. So I think this is all we need, Dropkick.css. So let's go ahead and open this into our editor, and here we go. It's about 200 lines, and it's not that bad. It's much easier after we go through this tutorial. You'll see that it's a lot easier to deal with select dropdowns, and let's get started. So let's copy this and actually cut it out and close this file. We don't want to save it, but we do want to create a new CSS file. So let's go into our CSS folder and create a new file called Dropkick.css, and why don't we open it up and paste what we have over there. This is just unnecessary comments, so we'll delete this out for now. Now that we have our default code in, let's just save the CSS file, go back into our HTML file, and add this link to our CSS file. Okay, so now that we linked in Dropkick.css, let's go back to the CSS file and add some more of our own code aside from the default. So go ahead and add this code in, and I'll just go over this a little bit. The first one is making sure that we have a margin of 0 and a padding of 0 for all the elements inside the HTML. Make sure that you include this in, because Dropkick.css or Dropkick.js will turn out a little bit weird if you do not include this in, so make sure you do. For the body section, we're just going to put a background color. I just got this from the design of the Premium Pixels. We're going to put a padding so that we have a little bit off-centered, so that we can see our drop down properly. Again, you can feel free to change this to anything that you want, and then all we're just going to do is assign our font to the correct size as well as the correct font family. Also, what we're going to do is make sure that we have the unordered lists have a margin of 0 and a padding of 0. This is just extra precaution to make sure that normalize.css doesn't mess around with anything, because it normalize.css resets everything to the default value. So we're just making sure that we're resetting it to what Dropkick.js, the CSS file, needs. Okay, so now that we added that little snippet of code, why don't we actually go ahead and add the JS file, Dropkick.js, into our old workplace. So let's go back to that download that we got from Dropkick.js, and just go ahead and open the main Dropkick.js file. So if it opens, we'll see it, and all you have to do is select copy, close this up, go into your JS folder now, and make a new file. Call it Dropkick.js, open it up, and simply paste the code. So we're not going to be doing that much to the JS file, but we actually will be adding a little bit of code over here in this HTML template area. This is just for the purpose of meeting our design requirements, which is that little border over there. I'll talk about it later, but let's go ahead and save this file. And now let's go back to our index file. If we go over here in the preview, same thing. All we have changed is really the background color, and you can see that 50 pixel pattern, the padding is in place. So let's go back into our index.html file, and why don't we hook up our JavaScript file and jQuery while we're at it. So go ahead, and here, what we have is our link to the Google hosted jQuery. What we also have is our link to our Dropkick.js, and what we also have is our script that basically runs the Dropdown select, like it initiates this whole thing. So basically what the script does is when the document is loaded, what this does is it selects the class of default, and it runs that Dropkick function, which does all of that fancy stuff and makes our lives a lot easier with styling the select form. What you might have noticed is that we have a little problem because there's no class assigned for default. Well, what Dropkick.js requires in order for their dropdowns to work is that on the select value, on the select tag, you need to have two values, the name as well as the class, and the class is obviously specified for the Dropkick. So let me go ahead and name this as well as assign this a class of a default as well. So I assigned it a class as default. Another cool thing about Dropkick.js is that if you have themes or something, for example, you only want the class of default to have a certain value, well, you can have 2 or 3 different select dropdowns, and they can have different classes, but they can also have the same classes, and you only need to declare this once. So if I duplicated this 3 times, the same things would apply to each of these dropdowns. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and save this as well as click preview, and as you can see, wow, instantly our change has been made, and look at that, we have our cool CSS style applied. This was default downloaded. You will notice that over here, let's go to our Dropkick.css, we have an image over here, the DK arrows, but if we go back into our HTML file, there is no arrows, and that is because we only copied that CSS. What we're going to do is figure out a better workaround for the image, and what we're actually going to do is get a font, which we will do right now. These arrows, what we're actually going to be using is a font with symbols in it, and I found the perfect one for this situation. Font Awesome on GitHub as well is also a great free font, and as you can see, there are all these different icons, and the advantages are quite extensive. Instead of having to resize and having pixelation, you don't need to, because it's a font, it's a vector, so it just resizes and it's perfect for every browser. Another great thing is that you can change size or colors easily. What if you wanted black, red, yellow, any color? You can change it so easily with using something like this. So this is a great thing to use, and a lot of people are using it now, and this specific font set is really nice, and it has great things like social icons, arrows, and this is the one that we're actually going to be using. It's very similar to our Premium Pixels design, so why don't we go ahead and download this font awesome and wait for it. There we go. Okay, so once the downloads are completed, all you have to do is open this up, and here we go. So this is what you'll see when you download the font awesome set. All we want to go into the font folder, and let's copy these 4 files. If I can find the button. There we go. And let's open up we have the 3 folders, CSS, fonts, and JS. So let's open the fonts folder, create a new folder called font awesome. Making sure that I spelled that right. And paste these 4 files. So okay, now that we got that in, let's go back to Coda, and we can add the script that will add the font into our CSS file. Okay, so let's just go to the top of the document. It's always good to put font files at the top of the CSS file, and just paste this little snippet of code. What it's going to do is basically declare the font awesome set. We're going to go to our folder roots, fonts, font awesome, and all those 4 files. And we're just going to declare the font weight to be normal and the font size to be normal. Okay, so now that we got out all our requirements in there, we're ready to get started on actually customizing the theme to match that Premium Pixels design at the beginning that we talked about. So first we're going to talk about the DK underscore container. We're going to make this so that it fits the design, so let's just replace this code with this, and let me talk about what I did. So I changed the background image to have a gradient for what the design specified. So if we go back to our Photoshop file, I just made it so that the gradient matches what was in the design. Also made it so that we have fallback background color, so that in case we have a browser that doesn't support the gradient, that we have at least a background color instead of being white. Again, we're gonna use the EMs in order to change the font size. This is going to make it a lot easier at the end, and we're actually going to use EMs for all of our values, including box shadows, border radiuses, margins. I'll talk about this later. Basically what we're going to do is make it so that it the whole select dropdown scales depending on the font size, which is really great. So what I also added here was the box shadow. Again, in the design we have a bit of a shadow underneath there, so all we're going to do is add that, and we're going to make sure that the white space value is set to no rep. For the DK container underscore focus, we're going to make sure that the outline is 0, so nothing extrudes that we don't want to, and we're going to make sure that that when you hover over the container, you'll have the cursor pointer, and there's no text decoration, just like underlines and stuff on the link values. Thing that we're going to be focusing on is the DK underscore toggle. Basically what this is, and if I go back to the design over here, it's this first option. So it's not the submenu, it's just like this first option area. It's they call it the DK underscore toggle. So what we're going to do is take out all the code over here, and we're going to replace it with this. So what this is going to do, again, we're just going to declare the borders, matching the design. We're going to declare the colors of the text over in here. So this is going to be the text that you see over here. We'll have a text shadow, a border radius, a line height, and we're going to make sure that this was in the default code, so we just put that in also, that the border color changes when you maybe click on it. What we're also going to do is implement our font awesome font. So what we're going to be doing is using that element over here, the after element. So what this is going to do is, after everything that's in there, the content, it's going to add more content. So we can change the color. We're going to specify the color. We can specify the font size, the line height, and this is the character code. What I actually did is I went into the font awesome folder, and in their index.html file, they had all the glyphs, like the icons, the content, the code. So I just pasted that in. This is going to give us that double arrow design that we wanted, and it's also going we're also going to put a text shadow on it. So as you can see, we're dealing with that button that would be an image, just like a regular font. So it's very customizable. It's great. We can specify margin, we can float it. This after element is very, very powerful. You can do a before and an after, actually. Okay, So now let's move on to the next element. The dk underscore open over here, these two values, this is basically assigning the styles when the dropdown is open. So let's paste in our code over here that we have for the premium pixels design, and all we'll have over here is a z index of 10. Before, in the default code, we actually had a box shadow over there that would like make a blue glow, but we don't want that. So what we're just going to do is make the z index 10. This is going to make sure that the toggle is above the menu element when we eventually have it there. The dk open under and the dk underscore toggle, this is gonna be basically the hover state. So when somebody clicks on it, it's gonna transform. So all I did is make this gradient to fit the gradient on this edge, the active state. I also changed the color of the text, the color of the border color, and I changed the shadow of it. We're gonna make the z index for this toggle. The dk underscore open was the z index of the menu, and the dk underscore open as well as the dk underscore toggle is the z index of the toggle. So we want the toggle to be in front of that submenu. What we're also going to add in is an after element, and this will actually change the color of the arrows that we added in, which is really cool. We can also change the text shadow. Again, you can see this after element being very, very powerful. For example, if you have a button, it can be you can add different icons and use this after, and it would be really great. So the after element is very, very powerful. Okay, so moving on to the next one. dk underscore options, this is basically the outer container of that submenu with the options in it. So what we're going to do is replace this code with this code. So we're just going to have a box shadow on the options. We'll make sure that the options, the links, have a padding, a line height, and make sure that the user can't select it. This is very important. So for example, if I select over this text, it highlights it. And after testing this design out, I figured out that a lot of times when you click it, you accidentally select it, and we don't want to have that look for our users, right? We want a polished look. So we are gonna choose the WebKit underscores WebKit and the user select to be none. For the list elements, we're gonna put a background color for this background color over here. And what we're also going to do is make sure that we don't display the first child. So let's go back to the index over here. As you can see, the first child is settings, and in our design, that first child, that doesn't show up in the options, but in a regular select menu it does. So altering it for our design, we're going to make sure that going back to the Dropkick.css, we're going to make sure that that first option, that settings, only appears in the toggle and not in the sub menu. What we're also going to do is make sure that when you hover it, the text becomes white, and it has a text shadow in it. What we're going to do is save our CSS file and actually open the Dropkick.js file. And over here, you can see on line 52, we have this template for the drop-down options. So this is basically going to repeat every single time that there's a new option. So this is basically a template. You can add things in. So what I figured out is that if you have a drop-down and on each options you have a border bottom, in our design, that border doesn't go all the way back there. And right now in CSS, there's no way to really specify like the width of the border that it goes around, except if you have padding, and we don't want to get into that right now. So what we can actually do is a simple fix is to add another div with the divider on every single option. So if we paste this code in, it adds a div with the ID of divider. Now, if we save this Dropkick.js file and go back into our Dropkick.css file, we can add custom styles for this divider. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Right now is just paste in these two declarations. First of all, we're going to have our divider. The width is going to be 90 pixels. This means that it's going to fit with this design. If this was the full way, then we wouldn't have to deal with this. All we would have to do is on this li, we would have a border bottom, and that would be the end of it. But since we want to fit with our design, we have to take the long way out. So what we're going to do is just have a width of 90%. Again, we're using EMs to make it scalable, so we're going to have a 0.1 EM, which is about 1 pixels. In the regular format, when you have just like the regular font, 12 pixels. And I'm going to have the margin auto. This will center it, and we'll make sure that our background color matches the design's background color. Finally, for the divider, remember, we don't want the last child to show up. Over here, under sign out, there's no extra divider, so we'll just make sure that our last child doesn't display. Finally, we're gonna have our inner container, and this is we're just gonna change this code a little bit by changing around the borders. We're just gonna make this again into EMs, changing the border colors, changing the width, and changing the text color of these options. So this is where you can specify the color of the options. And we're also going to put a text shadow on, and make sure that the margin and padding and list style type is none. This is very important because without this, normalize.css will overwrite the margins, and it's gonna not show up the way that you want it to. So we've actually gone to the end of this whole theme. All we have to do right now is this critical like enjoyment section over here a little bit. What you're gonna do is actually just change. What we're gonna do is just change this a little bit. We're gonna change this to EM, and also what we're gonna do is delete this max height. This comes with the default code, and we don't really care about the maximum height of the inner option, so we'll just get rid of that. What I did over here, I just skimmed over it a little bit. What I did over here is just I altered the code a little bit. I just changed the EM, and that's about it. And I think that concludes the changing of our CSS file. So now, for the moment of truth, let's go into our index.html file and preview it. Over here, there you go. Wow. So here's our options, and as you can see, it looks pretty cool. And yeah, the last thing we're gonna do now is change this, make sure that this select dropdown scales depending on the font size. Actually, we'll stay in our HTML file for now, and let's rename these names. So I'm just gonna rename this small. This is our default font, and make sure that we also have to change this class size to small as well. What we're gonna do right now is actually duplicate these select dropdowns. So we're gonna make a 1, 2, and 3. Let's name this medium, and change the class name to medium, as well as creating a large one and changing the class name to large. Now what we have to do is duplicate this script as well. This is just because we're changing class names, and I'll show you why. Over here, let's just change this to medium and large. Now save this index.html file, and if we go back into the preview, there's just 3 files over here, and nothing really different about them. They're just all the same, really. They're just really squished together. But let me show you how to scale this up depending on the font size. Go ahead and go jump back into our Dropkick.css file, and right over here above this, below the UL, we'll add 2 more declarations. We'll have dk underscore container underscore medium, and you're probably like, hey, wait a minute, our class name is medium and our class name is large. Does that mean that we can customize each class name like this, just adding a simple an underscore? And the answer is yes. It's actually really as simple as that. So if we have our default, if you don't want to declare anything, then you don't have to. But all you have to do is add your class name that you declared it to, and there you go. So as I said, on the media one, we have a font size of 20 pixels, and on the large one we have a font size of 40 pixels, and we're just going to have a margin so we can space it a little. So save this file. Let's go back into our index.html, and if we preview this, there you go. We have that little margin over there, but as you can see, small, medium, and large. Isn't that great? Like, I think that's really awesome that depending on the font size you can change everything. And that's basically how you do it. So that concludes our tutorial on how to style this Premium Pixels dropdown, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.